Hey there, it's Nub Tactics as Ilya Randgris. Today I wanted to talk about the new Black Mage AoE rotation, and as well how to optimize your clear speed and dungeon content. Disclaimer that the gameplay footage I'm showing of my dungeon runs may contain some mistakes in the rotation here and there. I am still getting used to remembering how to use Paradox and doing the rotation correctly myself. Before going into the rotation, there is one subtlety that I want to address which makes the Black Mage single target rotation slightly more delicate than it was before. With the addition of Paradox, most if not all of your Fire 1s and Blizzard 1s should be replaced with that spell. There is a key point though, that Paradox only provides the bonus effects provided you are either under Astral Fire or Umbral Ice. This is extremely important in Astral Fire, because if you are close to running out the timer on Astral Fire, timing out during your Paradox cast now means that it's impossible to get a Fire Starter proc off Paradox, and you do not restack one stack of Astral Fire. Previously, if you were about to time out during your Fire 1 cast, there was a small chance you could get lucky and get a Firestarter proc, only to immediately pick up your rotation where you left off. Even if you didn't get lucky, you could do a slower recovery by transposing into Umbral Ice 1, then going into a Blizzard 4, and then casting a slow Fire 3. None of these options are possible during the effect of Paradox, and rotation recoveries will now solely rely on casting Fire 3 or Blizzard 3, which are both notable DPS losses when used outside of no. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the AoE rotation. Going into Umbral Ice is now slightly different, since Freeze no longer grants Umbral Ice. You will first cast High Blizzard 2, and then cast Freeze to fill up your Umbral Heart stacks. These are the only two required spells for Umbral Ice phase. Though, you can choose to skip Freeze if the trash mob is going to die soon. After that, you can cast High Fire 2 to switch to Astral Fire, and then the rotation is 2 more High Fire 2s and 2 Flares. Once that's done, the rotation loops in on itself and you go back into High Blizzard 2. Note that you can use Manafont at 0 mana to get yourself an extra flare, which hasn't really changed from before. If you like using ethers, that is also an option for getting extra flares, but I personally can't be bothered with them due to their extremely high cooldown. The crux of getting high damage output with your AoE rotation is to shorten your high cast times with the use of Swiftcast and Triplecast, which is now easier than ever now that Triplecast has 2 charges. In the footage below, I'm going to outline some of the best ways to use Triplecast and Swiftcast to maximize your cast time reduction on high fire 2s and flares. Your Swifts and Triples should ideally be weaved out of an instant cast, which in this case will usually be a Thundercloud proc or a foul when you're doing level 80 or higher content. Here are some additional tips and tricks for clearing pulls quickly in dungeon. If the tank is doing wall-to-wall pulls, one train of thought is that you want to target the trash mobs that's in the most center of the pack for Fire 2 and Flare, so that you hit the most targets. As a general rule, and if you're trying to parse, this is usually the best way to take care of trash packs. However, there is a slightly more efficient method of clearing trash mobs, and that's to make sure you are always targeting the big mob of the pack with Flare and Foul. Flare does massive damage to the primary target and fall-off damage to the rest. Very often in wall-to-wall pulls, you'll have many trash mobs that have a medium amount of HP, and then you'll have 2 or 3 mobs that have a lot of HP in comparison. If your allies are putting out respectable DPS, the lower HP trash mobs should often die first, even if you don't hit all of them with your Flare. Since the big trash mob is often the last to survive, you want to make sure to use that extra potency on Flare and Foul to make sure the big mobs are taking that extra chunk of damage, so you waste less time finishing them off before proceeding to the next pull. A Thundercloud empowered Thunder 4 needs to tick for 15 out of 18 seconds to deal more damage than Fire 2. If your party is going fast, this often means it's not really worth it to use your Thundercloud proc on the mobs when they're about to die, unless you're in Umbral Ice and you want that extra 30 to 50 potency of burst. I personally think it's more useful to use your Thundercloud procs to use Thunder 3 on the big mob to have the dot rolling on it so that its health evens out to match the weak mobs even sooner. This allows you to use Thunder 3 to tag big trash mobs while you wait for the tank to round up all the mobs, so you aren't idling about casting Umbral Soul or Scathe. If possible, it's good practice to try to hold on to a Thundercloud proc at the end of trash pulls so that you can hit the next trash mob or even the next boss with an enhanced Thunder for free. Now that Manafont's cooldown is 120 seconds, you will often be able to use it once during each round of trash pulls, and once during the start of each boss fight. If you're doing 2-minute boss fights, Manafont will usually be off cooldown when the boss is about to die. It is advisable to save it, because the extra flare you get during trash pulls will be much more of a time saver than the extra Fire 4 in Despair will be. As far as resources are concerned, you want to make sure Triplecast and your polygon count is always at 2 charges or close to 2 charges at the end of a boss, because you get more value out of instant casting flares and high Fire 2s than Fire 4s and Despairs. Similarly, you want to make sure you've fully dumped your uses of Triplecast, Manafont, and Amplifier, and have them all on cooldown before going into each boss fight. Once you're in the boss fight, you can handle the fight as normal, but just remember that once you're at the last minute, you ideally want to start holding on to Triplecast and other resource buttons in preparation for your next set of trash pulls. Of course, if you're on the final boss, you don't have to worry about any of these things and you can just unload all of your resources. Ley Lines is a curious case. Most trash packs from my experience don't survive for more than 20 seconds after the tank has gathered up the mobs, and I personally do not like the wasted Ley Lines timer. So as a result, I tend to mainly use them on bosses, or trash pulls that I know will last longer. As I don't have a definitive answer for Ley Lines, I will leave it up to your discretion as to whether or not you prefer to use it on cooldown or for specific pulls. With the introduction of Paradox, Black Mage has a new method of instant burst, and that is to transpose out of Astral Fire 3 and then immediately cast Paradox. This can be extremely useful for finishing off a trash mob or boss, as Paradoxes cast in this way are sort of free, and could otherwise save you a Xenoglossy or Foul cast. Keep an eye out for when this tech will let you finish bosses quickly, as it can save you resources for extra polyglot stacks. These are all the tips I have for playing Endwalker Black Mage in current dungeon content. Make sure to treat Ino-chan with love and respect, and I hope to see plenty of explosions on the battlefield.